Well, as many of you know, I am a big sports fan. And while I have my favorite teams, when it comes to sports in general, I'm usually not picky. If there's a score and a contested outcome, I'll generally watch it. I find sports to be a fun escape, and most of the time I love how sports scores just make sense. In football, you run into the end zone, you get 6 points. You kick an extra point for 1. You kick field goals for 3 points, and if you get tackled in the wrong end zone, the other team gets 2 points. That, to me, clear as day. In basketball, you've got free throws for 1, a whole range for 2s, and a further range for 3s. Clear as a bell. Baseball, a run is 1, and the same can be said for hockey. 1 goal is 1 goal. You score, you get more points, and you win. I can even tolerate tennis and golf along the way, where the rules and the points get weird, but there's still a clear score. And so I like that. It's black and white, and that clarity just makes sense. But where I struggle with watching sports is in things like the Olympics, where we get into gymnastics and diving and ice skating, and the points become subjective. There's a judge who watches the action and assigns a score based on how well they say you did. You did 9.4 good, and this other person did 9.7 good. They win, you lose. I did years of competitive marching band in high school, and that was the ways that we were judged and evaluated and assessed, and it just drove me crazy. How can you create a metric for that? When competition gets into the gray area of human subjectivity, it always just feels so fickle. I like black and white in sports, and not the gray. But that seems to be the only exception in life, because in the rest of life, I often find myself enjoying the gray of life, leaning into ambiguity and discerning complexity. Give me a good book with a complex character who's not a pure virtuous character or a pure evil one, but exists in the gray of their own success and mistakes, and you're unsure if you should root for their victory or their demise. Give me a good complex moral question where there are layers and levels, complicating factors and deep social dynamics, and make the moral answer less absolute. And in the life of faith, I enjoy when a faithful answer to a question is both and, where we have to faithfully discern together the best course forward in the complexity of life. And in our gospel lesson today, we have a beautiful story where Jesus introduces us to the things in life that have some gray to them, some faithful subjectivity, and then to the thing that is black and white and absolute. While the black and white things in life give us clarity and certainty, I often find these to be much more challenging. In this lesson from Luke 6, as Jesus is confronted by the Pharisees, I believe that he invites us to explore the gray areas around Sabbath. Now, Sabbath may seem like there is no gray area possible in that conversation. Sabbath is absolute. It is a commandment that we remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And that should be the end of the discussion. But even the Pharisees regularly debated the gray areas around Sabbath. They were often caught up in legal conversations about how far one could walk on the Sabbath day, whether someone could light a fire and cook a meal, whether moving a herd from one field to another so that they could graze would be considered work. The Pharisees invited a lot of gray area into their debates around Sabbath as to what would or would not constitute work. They were just trying to catch Jesus doing something wrong. Seeing Jesus' disciples eating grain from the field, they thought they had him captured. But Jesus turned the question back on them, reminding them of David and his followers eating from the Holy of Holies. Not to mention, his followers were merely eating some grain from the field, something that the Torah allowed for as a kindness and mercy to those who are traveling through the land. But Jesus didn't make that legal argument. He instead aligned himself with David's own authority, and declared himself to be the Lord of the Sabbath. Authority to declare what is and is not keeping the Sabbath holy belongs to Christ alone. Within our own walk as Christ followers, we have invited some gray into this conversation of Sabbath. We do not observe the Sabbath as they did in biblical times. Our stores and restaurants are open. We drive. We maybe catch up on some work. We have soccer tournaments and musicals. And our day of worship and rest often gets whittled down piece by piece. This is a dangerous and slippery slope, because the gray and the ambiguity that Christ invites into the conversation around Sabbath does not mean that Sabbath is any less important or any less a commandment for each of us. Our souls and bodies and communities need rest. Our faith needs space to grow, and our community finds redemption in the countercultural act of Sabbath. We need Sabbath, and the Lord of the Sabbath is calling us to find new and creative ways to cultivate rest and renewal in our life and our community. What things can we say no to? What things truly can wait until tomorrow? How would our schedule and pace of life be transformed if we scheduled our rest and renewal first and built our life out around that, letting Jesus be the Lord of the Sabbath and the Lord of our life? Jesus calls us to find the richness of a life that rests in his promises, into a life of Sabbath. So with this gray and potential ambiguity around the meaning of Sabbath, and with the one who holds authority over this time, a trap is then set for Jesus that allows him to show us what truly is black and white, what is absolute in the life of a disciple. Because a trap is set in the form of a man with a withered hand who is in need of healing. Healing him would be a display of work on the Sabbath that was prohibited by the law and the Pharisees. But Jesus offers no room for debate. I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to destroy it? This is black and white. There is no gray here. If there is anything in all creation that is more important than a commitment to the Sabbath, the Lord of the Sabbath says that it is mercy. Mercy for this man in need of healing reigns supreme in the heart of Christ. Yet he has a withered hand and was not in mortal peril. He could have waited until the next business day. But mercy is the urgency of the gospel in every time and place. There is no waiting for God to redeem and restore the world. We are called to bear mercy now, at all times. And in all times, the right time for mercy is now. Mercy for our friends, for our neighbors, for strangers, even for our enemies. It is a non-negotiable in the way of Jesus. If there is no mercy, it is not the way of Jesus. And Jesus leaves no wiggle room on this issue. I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to destroy it? To do mercy is to do good and to save life. To fail to do mercy is to do harm and to destroy life. There's no middle ground on this issue. Mercy is the way of God. Mercy itself involves many different defiant acts that are means by which those in the valley of despair, wounded by those who stand on mountains of injustice, level the playing field, standing together on the plane of equity. Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is resistance. Mercy is strength. But mercy is not strength in the eyes of a world that is so infatuated with violence and domination. Mercy seems like weakness because it does not rely on our own human strength. It is not our strength that is on display when we show mercy, but God's. Mercy is an abiding trust that it is God who is at work through us, that it is God's salvation being made known through our love, that it is God's own way that is making the mountains of injustice level and the valleys of despair to be filled. We can't manage this strength on our own. Mercy is God's strength. Mercy isn't weakness. This is a difficult path to call our own, and mercy for our enemies is even tougher. And I don't believe that we can practice mercy alone. Because we're not just called to easy mercy, not just called to show mercy just amongst those who agree with us and love us already. We are called to practice mercy and abiding trust in God's strength and not ours, amongst those who may hate everything we are and everything we stand for. In order to be more resolute in this way of mercy, to refine this art and sing its sweet song outside our halls, this work of mercy must be practiced in community, must be enabled in community and sustained in community. We are fed in community at the mercy table and strengthened for our revolution of love. Christ is still speaking words of mercy in this place. Your sins are forgiven. This is my body. This is the blood of the new covenant poured out for you and for all people for the forgiveness of sin. Taste and see that the Lord is good. These are words of mercy boldly proclaimed in this place, and it isn't weakness. It is the sustenance of God's people here on earth, and it is the feast of everlasting life. As followers of Christ, we are being called to a revolution in this world, but not a violent revolution to which the world is so accustomed. We are being called to a revolution of love, because mercy is scandalous. It's bold. It's inclusive and affirming. It's not what the world is expecting. It's the opposite of what many people think they deserve. Mercy is many things, but mercy isn't weakness. Mercy is God's strength speaking tenderly to worldly oppressors through our love. Mercy opts not to resist people, but resists cycles of sin. Mercy reminds God's beloved that they are indeed God's beloved when their beloved nature and the beloved nature of those around them has been forgotten. But as black and white and absolute as the call to mercy is in the gospel, it is not an easy path in the world. We need to practice. We practice in fellowship here in Sabbath. We practice as a church when we engage in this merciful revolution outside our doors. We practice in communion with all the saints as we feast at Christ's table of mercy, and we step back out these doors to do it again. Mercy is a strong song of justice. It is a difficult work of love. There are two things of which I am sure. Mercy is a non-negotiable part of the Christian life. And mercy isn't weakness. Amen.